Alright, what's up? This is probably the 10th time I'm be doing it, so I'm just gonna go really quick through it and probably miss a lot this time. But I'm just gonna talk a little bit about Bitcoin, the underlying technology, so I'm just gonna get right into it. Bitcoin's been around for 8 years, and for the first 4 years, the only people really investing in it were people who were computer scientists or just computer nerds, programmers who knew what kind of the implication of it and understood the code, because you're able to look at the code still to this day. In fact, you could really go and work for Bitcoin or the developers for Bitcoin and change the way it works and try to improve it. And there's a lot of really smart people doing that right now. An interesting thing about Bitcoin is that Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder, is actually denied creating it, and nobody truly knows who created Bitcoin. A lot of people speculate that it was a group of people. The reason that I assume that no one has claimed responsibility for it is because, as you'll see later, and it makes sense once you start thinking about cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, not as an investment, but as really an alternative to what we think of today as money and how we trade. And I guess I'm just gonna get right into it. So I mean, you wouldn't want to be the blame of for collapsing governments' economic or economy. So the first thing, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the underlying principles of Bitcoin. A lot of people don't know how the internet works even, but when you look at your URL like this is actually just a domain, a very lengthy domain here. But this directly tells my computer, this sends it out to a certain server on an HTTP across the World Wide Web. It finds that server somewhere in the world. And the server is just a computer, just like your laptop, just like your iPhone, honestly, except for they're much more powerful computers and they don't have screens because they're just sending information, not receiving it. But this could be a laptop. But so, anyways, it sends back to your World Wide Web, and it displays it on your screen. And every time you click, everywhere you go, it's a different server, different. This might be in a completely different country than this one, but it happens so quickly today that people don't think twice about it. So the next thing I'm just going to say how Bitcoin works and what makes Bitcoin different than the way the World Wide Web works, and what makes it more secure and open is that when you send Bitcoin from a phone to a phone, it's all posted on a public ledger basically. So it's validated through a bunch of different servers here, as you can see, instead of just one server like on a typical web browser. It's all types of servers all over the world verify it, not just one. And these people, no one really knows. Anyone could set up a server like this is what called or this is what mining is. And in Bitcoin, when you mine, there's mining farms all over the world like this, especially in China, where they have special setups like this, where it's not a G or it's not a CPU like is in your actual computer. It's a GPU, a graphical processing unit, which is slightly different in the way they work. But anyone could actually go out and buy a graphical processing unit and set this up. But today it doesn't pay. But back actually when Bitcoin was around, a lot of people would just mine Bitcoin. And those people are all probably millionaires today because they got in very early if you were mining back in the day, just out of your own basement or whatever. But what happens then is that these computers all over the world computate complex algorithms, which I'm not going to go into at all. But basically, it's tough work for a computer to do, and many computers do it. And every 10 minutes on Bitcoin, they post a public ledger where anyone can go and see what wallet sent how much money to what wallet at what time. And these wallets are just really lengthy alphanumeric numbers, and they're not your name or anything like that. They have nothing to really do with you. Oops. So Bitcoin is really one of many different cryptocurrencies. As you can see here, here's a market cap. This is a popular website for looking at this. There's 100 top different coins, all that now work the exact same way Bitcoin was. But Bitcoin was around years before really any of these other ones. And arguably, and some of these actually other ones like Litecoin and Ethereum have better, the code for them and the way they work is slightly better, as you'll see. But the market cap is really what I think is the most important when it comes to a currency like this. Bitcoin's market cap's actually the 32nd largest economy in the world. So it's larger than a lot of very large countries, and even all these other currencies have billions of dollars in them. And some of these, Ripple is used for banks. Monero is completely anonymous if you know how to use it. And Ethereum it only takes 15 seconds, I believe. Yeah, 15 seconds for a block to be posted, where Bitcoin takes 10 minutes. So is it, and that's some high level, or you really, that's some computational stuff right there. But basically what that means is you're in Bitcoin, if you were to send millions of dollars in Bitcoin, it wouldn't be verified until 10 minutes after. Not to say that it would get stolen in that 10 minutes, but that person, it wouldn't arrive at that other wallet for 10 minutes. Where on Ethereum, it only takes 15 seconds. And you might think, oh, what's the big deal of this? Well, really what Bitcoin is trying to replace is the way we use money today. So if you go into a gas station, you can't buy a chocolate bar and wait 10 minutes for this to happen. We're 15 seconds, and I believe actually Litecoin is only a few seconds. So it's trying to compete the way we use credit cards today without having a central unit like bank. So that brings me to the next point. Really, is the reason I think Bitcoin and other different types of cryptocurrencies make sense is because when you look at the 10 most profitable companies in the world year after year, and especially if you go further back, they almost are all finance or banking companies. And the purpose that these companies served when they were founded back 150, 200 years ago is drastically different than what they do today. Today, over 97% of the world's currency is digital, which means it's just stored on a computer, and people aren't going in and stealing servers out of these companies. They're just hacking in. And when it comes down to it, companies like Apple and Google, who weren't around 20 years ago, know a lot more about how computers work, cybersecurity, than any of these banking companies. I mean, they're the ones who built a lot of this technology, and they have the most developers and the most skilled programmers working for them. So that's just these companies I feel like were built on a business model that really won't exist within the next 100 years. Um, these And it's hard to understand this in a sense from living in a first world country, especially like America, where our currency is actually the global standard, and that's how you back your currency. As in other countries, you have a reserve with US dollars in it. Nobody uses, or as far as I know, nobody uses the gold standard anymore. And we went off the gold standard, I believe, 30 plus years ago. And so all currencies today are just fiat currencies, which means it's only worth what it's worth because people believe in it. Which before, when you had gold, you could argue that it was a rare mineral and harder to find, and there was a limited number. But today, that doesn't exist. People and countries print off money when it's convenient for them. And this has happened throughout history a lot of times. And a really recent example of this is actually in Zimbabwe. 2 months ago, Zimbabwe had a really ruthless dictator, and he got ousted by a former party member. But anyways, basically, when he was getting ousted and the government was kind of crashing, they started printing off way too much money, and they just inflated their currency to the point where it wasn't worth anything. And this has happened actually a lot throughout history, even during the bank runs and the Great Depression. This is what happened: is all of a sudden your value of money is worth so little because the way currency and money has worked in the past is it's always controlled by a government and then always distributed by a handful, like an oligarchy of, or oligarchy of banks who really control a lot of it and currently don't do a whole hell of a lot to get rich. So in Zimbabwe recently, once this happened, a lot of people, even in Zimbabwe, they still have smartphones today. Actually, most people in the world have smartphones nowadays, and so people were able to get and buy Bitcoin, and that's why you can see, and this is something that's difficult. The exchanges in Zimbabwe, because you can't just buy Bitcoin, you have to buy it off an exchange, and a lot of times exchanges are actually limited per country, just the way that the ruling works, and some of the way that the exchanges, I'm sure, want to regulate who's buying. But anyways, the exchanges in Zimbabwe, they've been almost double recently what the current global standard is, and that's just because people in Zimbabwe, if you acted quickly, you were able to save what the value of your money was. But if you didn't take any action, literally within a couple of weeks, you could have been a millionaire, and all of a sudden, all that money you had is just worth nothing because your government is corrupt and has ruined really what any value it had. So people who were smart and quick to act were able to buy Bitcoin, a global currency, which is the first time ever, and this is what I think is why Bitcoin is going to eventually be the only currencies, because never before has there been a global currency. And as we get into the information age, when everyone's connected on the internet and everyone's able to communicate the way that there's corruptness in all over the world and governments and large businesses, people aren't going to deal with that. And the underlying Bitcoin is really just pure mathematics. And unless you can ban math and access to the internet, which you really arguably can't if people know what they're doing, there's just no reason that anyone, I think, will ever switch back. I would be shocked if the people of Zimbabwe would ever go back to a currency that was given by their government after this happened, because already many of them will have Bitcoin. They'll realize that you don't pay the fees and the transactions that you do through banks today, and then a situation like this is never capable of happening with your government like this. Alright, I just logged into Coinbase. As you can see, this is just kind of the layout. You can buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin here, and you can also buy and trade Ripple over here on Bitstamp, and the other three too. But both Bitstamp and Coinbase are both exchanges and wallets. And that's where people get confused, is that if you've ever used a trading platform like Fidelity or E-Trade, those are trading platforms, which is similar to Coinbase, but what's different is with stocks, you don't have just a number that assigns you, or a number on your wallet that really assigns you the value of that money. You have a purchase order for that stock with your name on it, so people aren't trying to hack in and steal that. But with cryptocurrencies, hackers often, in fact, that's the only thing they really use today to take money. If you have heard about the WannaCry ransomware, and ransomware is just a new type of virus, or a new type of really what hackers are doing now, and they just freeze your computer or steal your information and force you to pay Bitcoin to unlock it, and you only get 5 hours to do so. And the reason they do that is because Bitcoin is impossible to trace and the hackers know what they're doing, so no one's going to be able to find where that money actually went. And that's kind of what actually started Bitcoin's growth way back in the day. As you can see how this has changed, and how much it's grown in the last year especially. But it really all started this whole time. It was only really used on the dark web and on websites like the Silk Road to buy and sell drugs, because it was anonymous, and that was what the main ticket of it was. But now that people are understanding, okay, there's a lot more implications to a global currency that's decentralized, it's skyrocketed. And even within the last couple months, I think it was less than 3 months ago, I saw some of the largest banks CEOs bashing Bitcoin and saying it was a scam. And then earlier this week, I saw that they're about to release a cryptocurrency hedge fund, which I just thought was funny, because I don't know, they just not had their head up their ass. They could have invested way back here, and with all that money, I don't know how they can't see something like that. But anyways, so if you're on here, if you have your money, you have it in a wallet too. And exchanges like Coinbase do a good job of, if I put $100, not all of it's going to be on just one wallet. Where if Coinbase gets hacked, because these exchanges get hacked pretty often too, because they have the most Bitcoin and most cryptocurrency, honestly. So hackers are targeting them, then they're targeting you, and then they're just trying to make you pay with viruses. But so if you have a lot of money, if you're taking out student loans, putting it all into cryptocurrencies, you don't want it just to be sitting out on an exchange. So you have a couple options, and one of the most common options is to do a desktop wallet, because when you have your money just sitting in, if I just have it in an account out here on a wallet, it's just sitting on their servers. But if I have my money on a hardware wallet, or if I have it on my desktop, it's sitting on my local computer, which is probably less likely to get hacked, because hackers don't always know that I would have a desktop wallet. But if I do, the first thing hackers are going to look for is this desktop wallet. If your computer gets hacked nowadays, this is the first thing that they're looking for. They'll go out and they just find these and they try to break into them. And these are all just different desktop wallets that you could get on your computer. You can get some for the mobile too. Bitstamp and Coinbase, they're really web wallets, because your money's hosted on the web in a sense, because it's on their servers somewhere else. Where if you have it just on here, it's just on your computer. And all of these, it's not like if I were to have all my money on a desktop wallet and all of a sudden my computer just broke for some reason. It's not like none of these have, they all have backup plans. They all make you write down practically a paragraph of random words and letters that you should secure somewhere. And then if you were to lose it, your computer breaks, you can recover your Bitcoin. But by far the most secure way, and this is really the only way that you'll never get hacked if you go out and buy a hardware wallet from one of these four sites, and they're about $100 to $150, and they're kind of a pain, some of them to order, because I know when I was ordering them a couple months ago, they're all on back order just because of the surge in demand. And so most of these are actually that Trezor's from France, and I think Ledger is an American company, but it just takes a while to get shipped here and whatnot. But I would never never buy these, like never buy a hardware wallet not from these sites, because people who are smart are trying to sell them on Amazon, eBay, whatever, and all they're going to do is once you put your money into them, that's not a real hardware wallet. It's just going to send it right to their account, and you just lost all your money. So I'd make sure you buy it from these sites. This isn't some place to skip on. Um, but if you have it on a hardware wallet, basically all a hardware wallet is a micro piece of hardware, as you can imagine, that just has a memory stick basically, and there's no power running to this typically, and there's not even a CPU really in it. Um, and they're just really really simple things. But the way it works is that when you plug this into your computer, nothing on your computer could infect this. There's no information going into it. It's just basically taking the power, and you're able to send Bitcoin, receive Bitcoin on these hardware wallets where no one's able to get a virus on there and steal your Bitcoin. So unless someone runs into your house and finds your hidden USB looking hardware wallet and just steals it, you're going to be fine. And I mean, I'd still keep it in a secure place or hide it, obviously, but they're just really small like this. They're not too bad to set up, and I haven't checked out these two. I've only looked at Ledger and Trezor, and they're both really easy to use and very secure. So if you're going to have a lot of money out there, the thing you got to realize is don't put it out on a web-based wallet. I'd come over here to bitcoin.org, read through some of these things, maybe get a desktop wallet if you don't want to get a hardware wallet, because I mean, setting these up really isn't that bad either, and it's a lot more secure when it comes down to it. All right, so I pretty much got done going through the video saying what I wanted to say, and I just realized that I had forgotten to mention the most important part probably about Bitcoin, and that is that there's a hard limit on the amount of Bitcoins that will ever be created. And it's written right in the code, and you can go out and see that, but it's on 2140, we're going to hit the limit, and after that day, there'll never be any more Bitcoins created, and slowly people will only lose their Bitcoin, lose their wallets. So the value of your money, once it hits that limit, is only going to go up just because of supply and demand. Where every other currency throughout the history of mankind has always been able to print off, create more of that currency. And that's why every currency, even still to this day, has 2 to 3% inflation. And some countries have much, much worse than 2 to 3% we have here in the US. But that just means that your money, your purchasing power of your dollar over time is dropping with every other currency. With Bitcoin, it's not going to drop because there's a limit on it. So it's only going to become more and more rare. The other thing, too, is that, you know, going into the future, I would be shocked that if people are still willing to pay the 3 to 4% to accept credit cards when it's just as easy with any app out there. Coinbase, you can just send money right on your phone. With zero, basically compared to what the fees are now, 0%. You still pay like a couple cents on the, on the dollar or on the transaction, but it's nothing compared to what banks charge today. So I'd be shocked if banks are used the way they're still used 40 years from now, and I would be shocked if 100 years from now that currencies are looked at the same, is because when you think about it, it makes no sense to have all these different types of currencies floating around the world when, especially in the last 20, 30 years, we've become a global economy in every way and shape and form. And we trade with China. Everyone trades with everyone. Everyone can buy on the internet. And it's obviously just going to continue that way even more. So to have a barrier of having to change currencies just to do business with people it doesn't make sense when there's a pure, like there's already a laid out mathematical way that this could be replaced with Bitcoin or with cryptocurrencies. And I just don't see people using currency the same just because of the economics, the distributed computing, the globalization of a currency, and because it's decentralized. There's not one group of powerful people like a government or bank who control it. It's literally just math, and unless you can ban math in computers, which I do not see happening for many different reasons, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are going to exist. So that's why I think when I say don't sell your Bitcoin until it hits 80,000, I'm dead ass serious because it's gonna go up. There's every underlying principle of it is gonna benefit the average person in the long run. Unless you own a bank or unless you're powerful and you're high up in the government, why wouldn't you want to pay less for a transaction? Why wouldn't you want to be able to trade globally? Why wouldn't you want to be anonymous? And why wouldn't you want to have value that is stored based on a mathematical formula that anyone can go out today and look at the code for versus a group of people like a government or bank? So I just don't see it happening. But a lot of people do not think that way, that's for sure. But anyways, um, people are like, well, what can I get with why have Bitcoin? Like, what's the value of it to me? Well, you can go out and buy sports cars with Bitcoin. You can go out and buy food with Bitcoin. There's ATMs a lot of places all over the world that you can go out and buy, just get Bitcoin cash from. You can even go out actually right now and just go buy hemp clothing right in Bitcoin, which is pretty, pretty slick. So that's my plug on that. I hope you learned something today. This I rambled a lot, so if you have questions, if it didn't make sense, leave comments below. I'd love to talk more about it with anyone. So cheers.